So I'd like to start just by thanking you for your measured response on the protest question. The ability to protest in a democracy is a much appreciated freedom in our city and in the country, and it is really important that the police protest fairly and without fear or favour. So thank you for your words on that. I want to pick up on policing by consent, and you were talking about sort of the importance of policing with communities, going back to those Peel principles of policing. The police are the public and the public are the police. And I just wanted to ask a bit more about how you talked about the sort of, we're in a different kind of world, we've got an online world, and how you see we can renew that policing by consent with Londoners when we're in a situation where so many Londoners have experienced such disproportionality in policing that levels of trust are, as you said earlier, very, very low. And I wondered, do you have plans for a sort of big conversation with Londoners? How are you going to take that forward?
So, if you don't mind me saying, I think the big conversation idea is more a political statement than than something I would do. But I am going out meeting lots of people, and some of the things I said about community policing and how we work with people is illustrative. Just to give you one example, I was in Croydon, at a community centre there a couple of weeks ago, with a really interesting group of people who really care about policing of their area. And of course, Croydon has, over the last 2 or 3 years, has suffered a disproportionate number of murders of sort of young men. I think sort of almost entirely, if not entirely, sort of young black men in the community there. Most of the community sort of leaders I was speaking to there were from the black community. There were faith leaders. There were really impressive young men who were working on sort of community initiatives. There were parents there who'd lost a son. There were some school children, and the sort of emotion, anger, trauma in the room is really palpable. And there's that phrase which is in some of the sort of the national work that policing's doing, and thinking again about issues of race and how we do better on it, about black communities feeling over-policed and under-protected. I think it captures it well, but it's a bit of an antiseptic phrase. But when you're in the room with a group of people like that, it really comes across, because you get both that we're upset and worried, and we've got too many young men dying. They've had good success recently with the community partnership, where over the last, I think, 8 or 9 months they haven't had a murder, but they're very worried about it. So there's a real enthusiasm for working more closely with the police and helping us do things differently, and that partnership. So there's an appetite. On the one hand, there's the appetite to do more and a real sort of keenness for that relationship. But on the other side, there's a anger that the way we operate, they don't think's right all the time, and they worry about the way we deploy certain tactics, like stop and search, and whether that has the right effect on the community. So there's both that anger with what we do and that enthusiasm for more. The only way we fix that is by working with groups like that and the sort of very impressive people in the room. And
do you think that...
And you can't, sorry, I was going to say the last thing, you can't... I need to create the ways of working and the framework that we're working differently. You can't impose the solutions to that from Scotland Yard. It's about sort of creating an approach which is locally led and created.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, though, that there are lessons to be learned from places like Thames Valley Police, who have done a lot of work with diversion as opposed to criminalisation, for instance, for possession of cannabis? So they've done, I think there's sort of 7 years of evidence of those kind of divert programmes, which mean that people who are arrested at the moment and put into the criminal justice system and then have a criminal record actually don't get arrested and are put into sort of community-led programmes to divert them from
Yes.
criminality or anything that might lead into criminality. And is that approach something that you would be interested in?
So when I was seems a lifetime ago now, but when I was Chief Constable of Surrey, which is I left there in 2011, so I suppose it is a lifetime ago. One of the things I did my time as Chief Constable there was one of the driving forces nationally in building a different approach to out-of-court disposals. Then we created something which eventually became community resolutions. And this isn't about being sentimental or soft. This is about evidence. And the evidence is that on certain types of crime where you've got the right conditions in terms of the nature of the victim and the offender, that diversion generates higher victim satisfaction and lower recidivism. Frankly, if you've got both of those things, why wouldn't you do it? Those seem to be the two ultimate tests. If you only had one of them, maybe you might be questionable about it. But if you've got higher victim satisfaction and lower recidivism, then it seems to me a bit of a no-brainer. That thinking's developed over time. There've been quite a few national evaluations. The Thames Valley work I'm a bit aware of. The Met's done a piece of work which I
think in Lewisham there was a trial announced,
but was it called Turning Point? I can't remember what it's called anyway. But and there's a new framework in legislation for out-of-court disposals, which is supposed to be implemented in 1st of April, which I'm keen on. And I think we in the Met have been less ambitious in out-of-court disposals than many other places. I think another dimension to this, the Lamy review, looked at these issues, and I can't remember how long David Lamy's review was. It's probably 5 years ago now, maybe more than that. But he pointed out, as part of his look at race disparity and justice, I think was the broad sweep of what he was looking at, that in terms of out-of-court disposals, not only does the evidence base show that generally, say, high victim satisfaction, low recidivism, but the benefits with non-white offenders were even higher. So it's a good thing to do anyway, and in a diverse, complex society, it's an even better thing to do. So I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Well, I'm very glad that you're enthusiastic about it, because I do think it would be something that could really help in terms of reducing the breakdown in trust and confidence, and it could really help us.
I'm grateful for support. The other point I'd make on the back of it is, in the context where the criminal justice system has growing backlogs, not putting things into it that don't need to be in it also makes sense.
Indeed, yes, a practical thing. I just have one tiny extra question, Chair, which is just on the you've been talking a lot about technology and data, and I'm just wanting to check that you've got checks in place about disproportionality, because once you start using tech and data for decision making and the worry is that you have inbuilt disproportionality just in the algorithms within the tech, of course. And is that something that you're on top of?
So 2 points to make. One, yes, of course, be very, very careful what you feed into the machine and what you're using, so you don't accidentally create unethical approaches. But secondly, this is not about computers or algorithms making decisions. Just to be, I must be completely absolute on that. This is about using technology to help cops and staff make better decisions. I think that's the important distinction here. So I don't want any sense of, particularly for any of the media watching this, is no sense of a minority report approach to policing. It's quite the opposite. It's simply, we want our police and staff to make great decisions, and to do that, just like in any organisation, let's give them the technology and the data and the insights to help them do that.
Thank you very much.